Hello, I'm Bashir Mobasher, a postdoc fellow at the American University Department of Sociology. I'm also the president of Afghanistan Law and Political Science Association, which is in exile right now. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks to the editors of Deriti Comparity for inviting me to offer a brief introduction of my book, which is recently published by Routledge, Constitutional Law and the Politics of Ethnic Accommodation and Institutional Design in Afghanistan. What I discuss in this book is a set of political institutions, including the presidential system, centralization of power, electoral systems, and more that were set up by the Constitution of 2004 of the Republic regime. And the question I'm asking is, why these political institutions or the constitutional design in general failed ethnic accommodation in Afghanistan? And by extension, what was the role in the failure and collapse of the Republic regime in general, because the regime eventually collapsed in 2021, the Taliban took over, and the constitution was abolished. Now, in order to answer these questions, the first thing I needed to do was to offer a clear and comprehensive conceptualization of ethnic accommodation. In the introduction of the book, I identified four important aspects of ethnic accommodation, which include ethnic representation that comes in the form of power sharing at the central level, but also self-governance at the local level. The other aspect is inclusive laws and policies, particularly with regard to distribution of resources and distribution of opportunities and addressing concerns of various ethnic groups. And the last one is the institutionalization of cross-ethnic coalitions. And all these aspects or indicators of ethnic accommodation are pretty much significant, because if you do not address any of these aspects, you have not fully and properly accommodated ethnic groups, because there will be ethnic tensions and disputes. As with regard to the constitutional design, I make the argument in this book is that constitutional designs do not necessarily have either positive or negative impact on ethnic accommodation. Because when we are talking about constitutional designs, we are talking about a whole set of political institutions or political designs that together, that some of which may have positive impact on ethnic accommodation and others may have negative impact on ethnic accommodation. In addition, even each political institution or political design is a complex set of sub-designs, each one of which may have different relations with ethnic accommodation or different aspects of it. Now, what do I mean by that? If you look at the second and third chapter of my book, there I mostly discuss electoral systems for presidential elections, which was two-round system, and for parliamentary elections, which was single non-transferable vote system. One of the things you learn is that there was a lot of cross-ethnic coalition making in the presidential elections, but not in the parliamentary elections. You may ask the question, why was that the case? Now, one of the things I find out was that one of the major reasons was the electoral threshold under these two electoral systems. Under the two-round system of the presidential election, a presidential candidate had to win over 50% of the votes nationwide in order to become the president. Now, none of the ethnic groups in Afghanistan could deliver that 50% vote because of their population size. And therefore, presidential candidates had to form cross-ethnic coalitions in order to win cross-ethnic votes to become the president. We did not have such a threshold in the parliamentary elections. Under the candidate-centric single non-transferable vote system, you could win a seat with as low as 2% of the total votes And there were many instances where parliamentary candidates won seats of their provinces with just over 1% of the total votes of their provinces. So the candidates did not have any incentive to form a coalition or join a coalition, which is mostly costly. Therefore, the cross-ethnic coalitions that emerged in the presidential elections did not have the chance to re-emerge or sustain themselves to compete in parliamentary elections. And the institutionalization of cross-ethnic coalitions require that coalitions do survive and sustain and compete across elections and live and breathe in different branches of the government, the parliament, and the cabinet. So one of the lessons here we learn is that for ethnic accommodation to happen, we need inter and institutional congruence. In other words, we cannot get ethnic accommodation if one political institution, like the presidential electoral system here, for example, encourages cross-ethnic coalition making. But then we have another institution, like the parliamentary electoral system or the SNTV, that discourages any form of coalition making. The other example, well, the fourth and the fifth chapter of my book discuss presidential system in Afghanistan. And here we learn that Afghanistan during the Republic regime did have inclusive cabinets. There was some level of power sharing there, but not inclusive laws and policies. Again, why was that the case? Here we learned that the president was dependent on the parliament when it came to the issue of cabinet formation, appointing cabinet ministers. The parliament could even dismiss cabinet ministers and reject presidential appointees. But when it came to the issue of legislation, the Constitution gave the president enormous authority, where the president could bypass the parliament when making laws, amending laws, or changing laws. And that was why we did not have inclusive laws and policies. So here we learn another lesson, which is for ethnic accommodation, we not only need inter-institutional alignment, but also intra-institutional alignment, where different subparts of the same political design or the same political arrangement are in alignment in terms of ethnic accommodation. So in this particular case, the presidential system could have ensured inclusive laws and policies as well if the president needed the approval of the parliament fully and thoroughly based on the Constitution when making laws and policies. So one of my argument in this book is that we need to build a nuanced theory of constitutional design and divided societies that takes into consideration not only the context of different countries, but also the nuances and the complexities of the relationship between different political designs and arrangements or institutions and different aspects of ethnic accommodation. And it's important because if we want to achieve ethnic accommodation, and instead of replacing the whole constitution or whole set of political institutions, we can keep the parts that work well and then fix or tweak the parts that are problematic or have negative impacts on ethnic accommodation. So I'm going to end the introduction here. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you read the book and enjoy reading it. Bye-bye.